I warmly welcome you all. My name is Piotr Kardasz. I am the chairman of the scientific council of the company DUOLIFE, and I can today smile a bit. I can say that I belong to those happy people whose profession is their passion, and their passion is their profession. By education, I am a biologist, but not just because of that. That along the way, my interests meandered in that direction, when the world was discovering something new. When I was in my second year of studies, I wanted to learn more deeply. Human anatomy. In light of this, as a free listener, I started attending medical classes too, to learn the exact anatomy of the human body, because in biology I could study everything. I knew almost everything about animals, but I simply knew nothing about humans. I could not conduct the section here. This interest did not remain, not only because I chose this direction, but I think I had it. I am fortunate to have been born into a family of a forester, and thus a person who dealt with the forest. My dad was passionate about this topic, and I lived by the forest, the most forest area of Poland. Where are the bears? Where are the bison? And this interest transcended the boundaries of my age. Peers who essentially tried to realize what it was, the program, and I was exceeding it. So when I finished biology, I started studying gardening. That's why that at some point it turned out that mushrooms could be our future. But they can also threaten our lives. And then additional studies in the field of landscape architecture, design, and environmental planning in Sweden. This inspired me to learn about so-called phytoremediation plants. Phytos undoubtedly means life. Does phytos mean plant or their life? A remedy for a return to life, because life on Earth depends primarily. Everything from plants that can accumulate solar energy, having chlorophyll. But this is only a fraction of the truth, as they must have support in the form of specific strains of symbiotic bacteria and also fungi. When you see a tree is growing in an open area, and they cooperate with this tree mycelium in the form of hyphae, reaching sometimes up to 150 meters. And even when it doesn't rain for a long period of time, this plant feels good. Because these organisms, fungi or symbiotic bacteria, need glucose. And it is only the plant that produces. After all, we also need glucose, and animals do too. Of course, we also need protein, but do not forget that, in fact, indeed, not only animals possess protein, there are plants from the so-called legume group, such as that contain the same amino acids as meat. And what is important, that this form of amino acids is needed for us to build these 9 amino acids, which we cannot easily synthesize into 22, and that, in fact, for example, they are found in lentils, chickpeas, and peas, and this is a cleaner form as it is not processed. It's just a fraction of that. I will address this issue later. The purpose of today's meeting with you is conscious supplementation of supplements. In Latin means to speak completing. This means to supplement what we do not have in sufficient quantities in our food, or I will say that today it is still necessary to address the toxicity that even despite sincere intentions. Unfortunately, whether it is with suspended dust or with an excess of fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides, it may first get into animal feed and with the meat into ours of the organism in multiplied quantities. And at this moment, we need to link toxicity and supplement it beforehand. Many ingredients for everyone. Dear sir or madam, we primarily include microelements among these components, such as copper, molybdenum, zinc. I won't list them all, but also vitamins, because they are enzymes. Activate the enzymes of life processes. Juliusz Pawlik, an outstanding scientist, has been awarded the Nobel Prize twice. He said that supplementation is actually a new discipline of medicine because it allows to supplement what the organism can at a given stage, to not have insufficient quantity. And I would like to add, because today we already know from precise practice and research that the products contain toxic compounds, especially those in processed foods, that disrupt our digestion process. Please remember that just as plants have specific types of strains of bacteria, we actually also have thousands in our digestive tract, species of bacteria with different strains. And to this, there is perhaps a surprising paradox that there are no 2 people in the world who have identical flora. Of course, Bifidobacter and Lactobacillus dominate, but the proportions are changing. Why are these bacteria so important? Because they allow part of the food to ferment, such as preparing it for the final distribution of these components, which after being digested by enzymes, they remain in the body, but at the same time they obtain food for themselves. At this moment, one might wonder why we sometimes detect in the body the excess of certain bacteria in humans, or whether there are bacteria that are opposed to them at all, which are necessary and dominant for us. Well, there is a constant struggle there because, our bacteria have to check how it works at the Olympics. For example, a boxer, he must have a sparring partner, and it cannot be that the sparring partner is stronger than the competitor, because otherwise he will never win anything in the ring. It happens that due to disrupted food or even an excess of stress, because cortisol is a factor that depreciates many functions in our body, in the organism, so we may be weakened. And at that moment, unexpectedly, bacteria contrary to ours got into the food. 80% of immunity is formed, and this immunity decreases. Dear Sir or Madam, the logic of supplementation is precisely about supporting homeostasis. That is the state of energy balance in our body. We are not a team of interchangeable parts that work separately, indeed. Only the brain oversees this. But in reality, you know that 90% of functions are beyond our awareness. It operates an autonomous system. So, talking about what happens in the liver or what happens in our kidneys, the brain can register, and feedback exists between, for example, the intestine, whether between the liver and the brain. But the signals are such that as long as the intestines send a certain amount, let's say, out of 100 signals, the brain responds to the most important 10. So please remember that if we want to achieve something, we must first build our awareness also when it comes to health. Let us not give up, even if at this moment we are weaker, because you know that this can be influenced primarily by the weather. But this time of summer or later autumn is quite special, because as long as we want to relax during the summer, we can encounter bacteria in various regions of the world, or factors that may come as a surprise to us or to our immune system. Therefore, one needs to equip themselves when traveling to attractive regions of the world. Supplements that will complement the food. The truth is that research has proven that the healthiest diet currently on the globe, earthly one, is the so-called Mediterranean. This does not mean that it is only by the Mediterranean Sea, but with a predominance, so-called seafood, and of course from a sufficient amount of sunlight for our organism today. Suspended dust in the air is not only a threat to plants, which can be polluted when it is present with atmospheric precipitation, the surface of the earth, but at the same time limits access to light, and we can get burned in the sun. But at the same time, we are not able to produce a sufficient amount, the pigment of our skin, and above all, vitamin D. So the deficiency of these vitamins is already present. Even the vitamin D in the summer indicates that we should at least have this to supplement not only the vitamin, but also many other things. In fact, when I talk about homeostasis, please remember that everything starts from the fact that we put food into our mouths. Even this line, speaking of our saliva, which contains this enzyme, begins talking about the cleansing of the body from foreign bacteria. I often repeat that research has proven that the content of unnecessary components, the bacteria or fungi, even pathogenic ones, is comparable to this, that are found in our feces. Dear Sir or Madam, this means that the organism must cope with it. It obviously starts with saliva, then it goes to the stomach. There is hydrochloric acid, which activates pepsinogen to pepsin to start. Speaking of protein maceration, but imagine if we do not stimulate this process, then by saying no, chewed perfectly, not chewed perfectly, the meat is, to put it further, poorly digested because the enzymes produced by the pancreas, Tepsi and amylase, do not have access to these protein fractions, that is, to what it was in the meat that we did not survive. And here a fatal thing happens, because what is not digested, we cannot, to be used so that it is delivered to the liver via the vena cava. It cleanses, and then the components are distributed throughout the entire body. Only this part, speaking indigestible, serves as food for putrefactive bacteria, and they are enemies of our health. For example, Clostridium. Today's statistics say that they are responsible for 60% of oncological diseases, so-called soft organs, while Proteus damages liver function. Among others, the level of glutathione drops. As a consequence, our immunity also declines. There is no serotonin, dopamine, that is the negative happiness hormones, deregulation of the thyroid. And it is responsible for the hormonal balance of our body, and above all, the loss of so-called short-term memory. This is a signal. If you come home and look at the television and sometimes an outstanding figure, speaking of someone known either in the world of song or music or even politics, and you forget his name, it means that something is happening. There's definitely something wrong in your stomach, and you should reach for the right good supplements. What is a supplement then? I repeat once again, it is an addition, a supplement to what the body needs. And in the food that we created, there is not enough amounts and often food. It contains harmful factors for us, so there must be, among other things, antioxidants. That is, factors that counteract the inflammatory state. And please imagine in simple language, it means that the more colorful the vegetables and fruits, that's where those antioxidants are. There are more factors. This is chlorophyll, carotene, flavonoids, anthocyanins, lycopene, whatever it may be called. These are the colors, and please remember that plants have them to defend themselves against pathogenic fungi, bacteria, viruses, or any other parasites. If it helps them, it will help us too, but this is pure indeed and does not burden the body. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it is opposed to treatment. We heal when we are feeling sick. Of course, it would be very negative advertising if someone said to you, if one does not supplement, one treats. This would mean that he has to wait for the disease. And don't wait for illness, because sometimes it's hard to speak out about these things that they impose on us. Remember that a person, regardless of what food they have, also, today he is aware having, yes, regardless of my fields of study, this knowledge that I have here only, I signaled. I was and am to this day indeed a television journalist or radio. I published many books, but I traveled the world to document beauty, nature, and also so-called natural medicine. I was amazed by the wisdom of nutrition, for example, of the Papuans or someone in the central region, in Africa or in South America in the Indian steppes. They tested which plants are healthy for them. An example of the Araucania, which has been living since 1864, speaking high in the Andes above 3 and 500 meters, they were unknown to civilization, despite the fact that earlier, in the year 1492, this land was conquered by the Spaniards, and it was then recognized that they live healthily, relatively belonging to the so-called population of the longest living in the world, and they certainly did not have such modern hospitals as we do. I will put a period here because it is a fact that if we are talking about in supplements, it would be best if the food that I have mentioned here, even in vegetables or animal products, were of the highest possible quality. Today, you know that if the land is cultivated intensively, and I don't want to say that someone had bad intentions here, because in the past efforts were made to secure it, a sufficient amount of food so that there is no hunger. Therefore, varieties of plants were selected that had larger fruits, larger tubers, everything that is larger. Today, the truth is that those varieties that yield greater profits because they have more, simply larger tubers can yield more kilograms of produce from a given area. They have too few regulators, meaning vitamins, microelements, and many components. And by talking too much about carbohydrate products, which are in fact sugar. And this is our burden. Therefore, it is necessary to supplement what is lacking in the food. If you look at this slide, you can see a nice bag with nice vegetables, colorful green, and of course supplements. This does not mean that this bag is equivalent to a bottle, of course, but it means that for us collagen is a fundamental protein, as it constitutes 30% of our... The organism is practically based on the structure of this valuable protein due to the fact that it is composed of only 3 amino acids. Next, my blood, which means my blood. After all, this is the fluid of life every 15 seconds. We need, at least in Poland, we need for blood transfusions. In Poland, over 2 million blood units are used annually, and often a specific blood type is missing. Please imagine that already in the 1960s, and basically in 70, the Japanese have announced that they are almost ready with a substitute fluid for blood. Then they moved the deadlines. They are moving them. Until today, it turns out that nothing like that could be done. This is indeed, however, life, and with the help of a properly composed diet, what I will be talking about shortly, we can stimulate the body to the production of this life fluid. And finally, chlorophyll. Chlorophyll. This is essentially the secret of our life, because it is the plants that possess it. It is precisely because of this that sunlight can transform carbon dioxide, carbon and water with chlorophyll, essentially into sugar. And these plants, as I mentioned earlier, collaborate with specific fungi and bacteria are capable of equipping and synthesizing their own protein. Animals consume this. We can also consume this or eat meat products. The condition is that it should be maximally clean. Chlorophyll. Of course, I will try to share a bit more towards the end of today's meeting. To characterize you, now I would like to address what to consider when choosing supplements. Well, this is very important because, ladies and gentlemen, I said that today, practically, there are cultivated plants in the world, and there are very few wild-growing ones. These wild-growing, sometimes scornfully, some of them called weeds, have the initial value, which is what we are waiting for. However, those that I mentioned, which are cultivated, I'm not saying that they are bad, but often lack some nutrients. Well, we should. Supplements produced from 100% natural value educate. Products, that is, from various, not only herbs or fruits, vegetables, but precisely such a product. 100% no, 15% of something. Because remember, 15% is exactly a percentage of 15 for our body. It is not the same as 100% of 100 components that are found in the plant. In other words, cultivated organically or growing wild. Fortunately, some of these plants, especially those used for phytoremediation, or I used scientific neologisms for adaptogenic plants, and I will try to explain shortly, to explain to you what it means. But above all, if we already have a pure plant product from which it will be supplement, there cannot be any genetically modified plants there. There can obviously be no processing, whether thermal or otherwise, chemical, because it disrupts the profile of what this plant wants to offer us. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to explain now what biological background means. This means that in addition to the main components, such as vitamins and trace elements, whether flavonoids, anthocyanins, basically the proportion of the remaining composition of this plant should not be removed. It's not just about the same plants, but all the components that in which they were incorporated. We call this biological background because our organism has been programmed for it. We are, of course, changing this background, and that is our misfortune. Therefore, it is necessary to supplement with well-composed supplements. Please remember that today we are discussing the value of nutritional products, including also supplements that belong to a special method, indeed, speaking of care for health. We primarily include plants whose value, importance, and significance has been recorded. Pharmacopoeia. If I wanted to translate memory, for me it is not so difficult today. But these are 4 volumes, each with a list of about 400 described pages, substances that can be useful for humans and are referred to as such. Adaptogens that we can take just like ginseng or like citrulline. Chinese in any quantities. The body takes as much as we need, and the rest is provided that we drink. Water, and we need to drink it throughout the day. We excrete at least 2 liters of water from the body. There are plants. Speaking of adaptogenic plants, such as you already know them, flavonoids and anthocyanins are pigments, which means they are antioxidants, but also phytoremediation. These are plants that can grow in extremely difficult conditions, but they have a partner, bacteria, including fungi, but above all bacteria, which even from contaminated substrate do not allow the plant to absorb nutrients. The structure of the protein, it only binds nitrogen from the air. At the same time, they do it not for free, because the plant produces sugar for them. And at this moment, it is collaboration. Such plants, in this case, for example, wild rose, can be planted even on the highway, and they will grow there. But at the same time, they will contain something that would not have in other circumstances because of these collaborating bacteria or fungi, but especially the bacteria. These bacteria are capable of producing a serum that neutralizes soil contamination. And such plants should be included in the supplement, along with those key ones that they are carriers of vitamins, microelements, and of course, a certain amount of protein. Also fiber, which until recently was not appreciated. And this is food for our bacterial flora. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I have said what needs to be paid attention to. The company, it has developed a model of so-called golden standards. I call them the foundations of the value of supplements. Above all, a unique combination. Well, every supplement must contain a leader, which is a type of plant, which sets the direction of action. For example, if I will soon be talking to you about DUOLIFE Hope for the Night, then there is such a leader who organizes everything, processes in our body, and it was not pulled out of thin air, because indeed, Professor Brown, he received the Nobel Prize in 1999 for deciphering the wisdom of the factors that are contained in this plant. Like a labeled envelope with a specified value necessary for a given organ is distributed. Of course, I told you about adaptogen. For example, ginseng improves our vitality, one of the factors. I could list more. And finally, a phytoremedy, just like sea buckthorn is capable of, speaking our body to defend against bacteria because it already contains something in its composition, what we could call a serum against specific bacteria. I only mention the surface of this, speaking of the issues, but you understand that this is very important. Now, the packaging is very important. If there is a plant extract, it cannot be administered in such cases. Plastic, and if it's glass, then pharmaceutical glass at the same time, of high resistance. And in this case, As I said, neither conservation nor thermal treatment is applied, neither chemical nor pressure. At this moment, high pressure allows for the exclusion of all pathogens, not destroying the organic composition of this set. What is in supplement? So a complete product without GMOs, without artificial preservatives, and with many ingredients, clinically tested in our supplements. Please remember that clinical trials are not necessary for supplementation. Therefore, that we provide a healthy plant which already has its position in the pharmacopoeia. But if additional funds are being spent to study a specific population, then we have certain knowledge that not only do we help, but we achieve results. Fantastic, even in the case of never being ill. So let's not confuse the concept of a supplement with a medication, because a medication is administered when the organism has indeed crossed the boundary of its ability to defend itself. The leaflet of each medication contains information about potential side effects, and they often are, but we have no choice. We have reached a critical moment in which our body is no longer will be able to perform their functions correctly. If we had regularly taken supplements earlier, there would be no such case. I just want us to try to take care of ourselves, complementing what we lack. There is no food, and providing factors that bind what is in the food, because, for example, processed food. Ladies and gentlemen, about the supplements I was just talking about, they were mentioned by various opinion-forming bodies. I value above all the so-called quality certificate guaranteeing the highest quality of the product in Europe, or European guarantee of the highest quality. But it is extremely informative and a highly good indicator to define the FDA for our products that are allowing drugs or food products on the American market. It turns out that the average value of the composition of our products has been determined, is 10% higher than the average we provide. But the most important thing is that the digestibility of our products compared to others is 6% higher. Do you know why? Well, that's because there is such a set in the supplements. As I said, he is a leader. It is a plant often considered adaptogenic with excellent documenting, and at the same time, there are adaptogenic plants or phytos. It is remarkably and synergistically summed up, which means it enhances value. Products, just as a very good coach is able to lead a team well, trained to lead to victory. So this is what happens with such a supplement. It is worth telling the story of DUOLIFE day and night. Well, ladies and gentlemen, these are the products. In short, it improves our psychomotor skills. We think more efficiently and perform tasks more efficiently. Our immunity during the time when we are active is higher. At night, our muscles work better. However, remember that the organism adjusts to cleansing what we have eaten. And in fact, if we are eating something at a given moment, it is only after 24 to 48 hours that it is fully digested and enters the liver through the portal vein. The liver works at night. If we eat too late, we indeed interfere with this work and actually speak incorrectly. The liver can perform its function, thus only the purified product through the blood. Of course, I won't specify the road, but you can guess that from the liver delivers blood to the heart. From the heart, it flows through the main artery throughout the body, of course, to the lymph and the cells, which are nourished in this way. But in the meantime, the blood visited the lungs, took in oxygen, and nutrients. This is the foundation of our life. And now in return, this blood also drains. The so-called metabolites, which are the result of these life processes, every cell, because cells build organs, perform their work, must to be excreted, and then it is filtered by the kidneys. But remember, I will only mention that at DUOLIFE for the day how I said, well, he is not a leader. On the other hand, the synergist is precisely a plant that belongs to the plants, legumes, and it has regulatory factors such as that influence our hormones. These are adaptogenic plants, such as ginseng, or for example, sea buckthorn, which is a plant, phytomedicine or wild rose. But incorporated into this are 4 Nobel Prizes, speaking of Nobel laureates. They developed this, and we benefited from their wisdom and my 4 patents, which in 2003, they were distinguished in Europe for the discovery of a certain phenomenon regarding phytoremedies. And finally, DUOLIFE for the night. This product was created earlier than the day, because as far as I knew, from which supplements. One can say to compose something that stimulates our psychomotor skills, I was delving into very wise studies, and I came across the study by Professor Jung, who was just talking about what was mentioned earlier. I have already outlined to you that at night the body undergoes cleansing, and at this moment, eating food too late disrupts this profile. So I decided to take advantage of this, and I started to compose plants where in this case, goji berry is designated as a leader. And again, one of the leguminous plants is a synergist, a phytoplant, phytoremediation. For example, there is chokeberry, which plays a key role for our heart. There is, for example, mulberry, which regulates blood sugar levels. So at night, we not only get our sleep, but speaking of our body, it is in a state to cleanse through the liver everything that will be distributed later, with the help of blood to all cells. We wake up refreshed with a synergized amount of serotonin and dopamine, and with an open mind. If previously the processes of decay occurring in the intestine could be this, the process is disrupted at this moment. After consuming such a liquid, we are ready for activity today. Ladies and gentlemen, collagen is the protein most needed by us. It consists of glycerin and proline practically, but we have 29 types of collagen in total altogether. On the other hand, for example, our skin is made up of the first type and third. Don't think that there is any problem with this. For example, there will not be a specific type of collagen because our body knows which amino acids to use, building protein to construct our structures. Here, the collagen comes from fish skin. This collagen is most similar to human collagen, but it contains chondroitin and glucosamine, and simultaneously silicon carriers. Here, in this case, there is bamboo or nettle, or perhaps horsetail. Since 40% of the building functions of the body are based on the presence of silicon, collagen, practically speaking, ladies and gentlemen, is responsible for connective tissue, and connective tissue is universal. It occurs in three forms. The liquid form is blood and lymph. We have 5 liters of blood and 20 liters of lymph. In addition, I am building cartilage, without which the structures of our joints do not function. At the same time, our skeleton, but it also influences the regeneration of our muscles. I will not talk about all the factors. You understand, ladies and gentlemen, that this is a value in itself, but most importantly, that the largest organ of our body is the skin. It constitutes 6 to even 7% by weight, because it can, ladies and gentlemen, have a weight, at least a few kilograms, where the internal organ, the liver, weighs only 1.5 kilograms. And just imagine he is being nourished at the very end, well, because it covers our body. Therefore, collagen is needed both from the inside, and the one that comes from fish is speaking native, meaning broken down to the smallest particles. When we digest, speaking of animal products, we digest, on average, 3 amino acids per 2 connections. In this case, we even have them broken down to individual amino acids. Therefore, our body, when it needs to recreate muscles, or rather to rebuild them, should we build bone or cartilage, blood or lymph? He knows in what proportion to take it. Here, the value is contained in this, my blood. My blood is the fluid of life. I told you that we need a blood transfusion every 15 seconds. Here, of course, there are extracts primarily from the quiet beet, which has anthocyanins, flavonoids, so not only the color itself, but also the microelements, key to the value of this fluid. Of course, there is also an extract from red grapes as well as from spinach. Well, of course, with acerola, this product has almost 60 ingredients. In this case, a special formula is included, which consists primarily of B vitamins, B complex, but also vitamin C, about which I already said, but above all, vitamin D, E, and A. And so these fat-soluble vitamins, remember that, in fact, it is stimulated by blood, and stem cells are activated. Bone marrow, hemoglobin is rebuilt, and thus this factor, which distributes oxygen throughout the body. But at the same time, since the bone marrow is stimulated, lymphocytes are produced. T cells, which are activated by the thymus, are capable of producing natural killers. That is, natural recipient guard our body. Not a recipient, but indeed a natural defender. Our immunity develops a bit later. Between the lithium blocks, it lasts from 24 to 48 hours. The first signal of an increase in the production of immune proteins, it is an increase in temperature. Please remember that forcefully lowering the temperature makes little sense. In children, it cannot exceed 2 degrees, as an elevated temperature of 1 degree indicates that the entire organism has begun to gather strength and is speaking, stimulating the production of immune proteins by 30%. If 260% is a lot, if after 48 hours the temperature does not decrease, it means that the organism has been defeated. And at this moment, it is really necessary to seek the help of a doctor. Just saying basking or cashing out no longer helps. That's just as many signals in this regard. I will repeat once again at this moment, speaking of chlorophyll as something exceptional, gift of nature, because the energy of the sun, thanks to the chlorophyll contained in plants. In the leaves and other parts is processed into nutrients. A mental shortcut, but in fact it is so. Please remember that it is obtained from the smallest organism, what chlorella alga is. Please remember that if we had, for example, an oak tree with a crown spread of about 40 meters, and speaking of a lawn that has the same area of 40 square meters, the lawn will have an intensity of nutrient production 8 times higher than this house because it uses the trunk for branches, while chlorella has the complete set of everything included, ladies and gentlemen, with 8 essential amino acids, all micro and macro elements. And of course, we don't just provide chlorella, but also chlorophyllin, also obtained from Germany. This is, of course, also enhanced with peppermint oil. This product primarily stimulates the liver to produce glutathione. Our immunity automatically increases, as does the level of serotonin and dopamine. Importantly, he is able to alkalize the internal environment as the pH of the blood should be. It should be 748, provided it is falling towards 7, and God forbid below that. At this moment, various types of pathogens are hatching in our bodies. In this case, chlorophyll is ideal, but the most important thing is that stimulates erythropoiesis, which is the production of red blood cells, which are needed to bring in oxygen. Such an addition regulates, of course, our hormonal balance. And in athletes who are intensively training, there is a state of exercising, or even in the arena. When records are broken, it is able to counteract muscle acidification because it carries with it almost 38 centimeters through the gastrointestinal tract when we only absorb 28% of oxygen through the lungs. Dear sir or madam, I could talk about the remaining supplements. To say even more, there will be a time when we will return to this. Today, I would like to wish you a good time, health, and a smile on your face. I just want to say that science today has proven that a person goes through 4 stages. Life can be fully realized, but one should not exceed youth. In other words, above 30 years, or actually above 25, the most important thing is the time spent building a family and gaining such, referred to as an entity for the rest of life. Let's not overdo it either, because at this moment we will taste the desire for profits only for the same profit, and here you need to enjoy life and also skillfully navigate through it. This last stage, that is the stage speaking in a cheerful manner, I don't want to say, old age, maturity in life, then our body needs more rest. Remember that every day, more than every minute, changes occur in our body. 2 million cells into new ones, but they never have that kind of rigor as those that were from childhood. By taking supplements to meet our current needs, we will be healthy. But at the same time, our mood will allow us to enjoy life. Smile at each other. I wish you joy in life, a cheerful mood, and friendly environments in which you can move all the best.